There is a kind of English that does not need to be loud. It does not rush to speak. It does not try to impress. It does not compete for attention. And yet, when it appears, people listen. This is not the English of speed. It is the English of weight. Every word lands. Every pause carries meaning. Nothing is wasted. This kind of English does not announce confidence. It assumes it. You may have felt it before. Someone speaks slowly, calmly, without decoration. And somehow, the room adjusts. Not because they are dominant, but because they are grounded. Quiet power works like that. It does not push outward. It pulls inward. It creates gravity. This channel is built for that kind of language. Not the language of performance, but the language of presence. Here, English is not used to prove intelligence. It is used to hold space, to think clearly, to respond deliberately, to speak only when something needs to be said. Quiet power is not silence. It is precision. It is knowing that fewer words, placed carefully, can do more than many words thrown quickly. When you learn English this way, you stop filling space. You start shaping it. This changes how you listen. You are no longer waiting for your turn to speak. You are actually receiving what is being said. Receiving requires stillness. Stillness sharpens perception. You begin to hear intention, not just information. You notice when a sentence is firm, when it is tentative, when it is complete. These signals matter more than vocabulary size. People respond to clarity, to calm certainty, to presence. They trust it. Quiet English builds trust, not by persuasion, but by coherence. What is said matches how it is said. There is no rush between thought and expression. This alignment is rare, and because it is rare, it carries authority. Authority without force. You may think power comes from volume, from speed, from complexity, but real power often moves in the opposite direction. It simplifies. It slows. It chooses restraint. Restraint is not weakness. It is control. When you control your pace, you control your impact. You don't react immediately. You allow a pause. That pause is not empty. It is intentional. In that pause, you decide. Quiet English gives you that pause. It gives you room between stimulus and response. Room to choose words that reflect thought, not impulse. This is the foundation of quiet confidence. Not pretending to know everything, but being comfortable with what you know. And with what you don't. You speak from center, not from urgency. And people feel that. They may not know why, but they feel it. This is the kind of English that does not fade when pressure appears. It becomes clearer. Pressure reveals structure. If your English is built on speed, pressure breaks it. If it is built on calm, pressure sharpens it. This is why quiet power matters. Not for performance. For life. For meetings where words matter. For conversations that shape decisions. For moments when silence is heavy and what you say carries weight. You don't need more words for those moments. You need steadiness. That steadiness can be trained, not by speaking more, but by listening deeper, by slowing thought, by respecting pauses, by letting meaning arrive before expression. This is where we begin. And slowly, something interesting begins to happen. You realize that the problem was never your intelligence. It was never your memory. It was never your ability to understand English. The real problem was pressure. Pressure to be fast. Pressure to be perfect. Pressure to sound like someone you are not. When pressure disappears, your mind starts working differently. You stop translating every sentence. You stop chasing grammar rules. You stop judging yourself while listening. You begin to hear English as sound, as rhythm, as emotion. And this is where real learning starts. Because language is not a test. Language is a relationship. Think about how you learned your first language. No one explained grammar to you. No one corrected you every second. You were allowed to be wrong. You were allowed to be slow. You were allowed to listen for a long time before speaking. Your brain learned naturally because it felt safe. English learning works exactly the same way. But most adults never feel safe when learning English. They feel watched. They feel evaluated. They feel behind. So the brain closes. When the brain is under stress, it stops absorbing. It switches to survival mode. That is why you forget words you already know. That is why you panic during listening. That is why your mind goes blank when you speak. It is not because you are bad at English. It is because your nervous system is overwhelmed. Quiet learning changes this completely. Quiet learning gives your brain permission to rest, permission to observe, permission to absorb without reacting. And absorption is far more powerful than effort. You do not need to push English into your head. You need to let it enter. That means slower input, softer repetition, gentler exposure. Instead of forcing yourself to understand every word, you let the meaning arrive naturally. At first, you may understand only 20%, then 30, then 40. But something magical happens. Your brain starts connecting patterns, not because you analyze them, but because you heard them many times. This is how fluency grows. Silently, quietly, almost invisibly. Most people quit English too early because they expect visible progress too fast. They want proof. They want results. They want confidence immediately. But real language growth feels boring at the beginning. It feels slow. It feels uneventful. It feels like nothing is happening. Yet inside your brain, new neural connections are forming. Your listening improves before you notice it. Your pronunciation shifts before you hear it. Your thinking in English begins before you are aware of it. Quiet progress does not announce itself. It reveals itself later. One day, you realize you understood a sentence without translating. Another day, you answer naturally without preparing. Another day, English feels familiar instead of foreign. That is not an accident. That is the result of calm exposure over time. This is why consistency matters more than intensity. 10 calm minutes every day is more powerful than 2 stressful hours once a week. Because calm learning teaches your brain that English is safe, and safety creates memory. Now let's talk about listening. Listening is the foundation of everything. Speaking comes from listening. Vocabulary comes from listening. Pronunciation comes from listening. But most learners listen incorrectly. They listen with tension. They listen with fear. They listen to catch mistakes. Quiet listening is different. Quiet listening means you are not trying to understand everything. You are simply letting English pass through you, like music playing in the background, like rain falling outside your window. You are present, but not forcing. This kind of listening trains your brain to recognize sound patterns. English has its own music, its own flow, its own pauses. When you listen calmly, your brain starts predicting sounds. That prediction is the beginning of fluency. This is also why subtitles can be dangerous. They force your eyes to work instead of your ears. They interrupt natural listening. They create dependency. If you must use subtitles, we use them sparingly. Use them as support, not as a crutch. Sometimes listening without understanding is exactly what you need, because understanding is not always conscious. Your brain understands before you do. Now let's talk about speaking. Quiet power in speaking does not come from talking a lot. It comes from speaking with intention. You do not need to speak fast. You do not need to speak loudly. You do not need to fill every silence. Silence is not weakness. Silence is control. When you speak calmly, people listen more carefully. When you pause, your words carry more weight. Native speakers do not rush. They breathe. They pause. They think. You are allowed to do the same. Speaking slowly gives your brain time. Time to choose words. Time to structure thoughts. Time to stay relaxed. Relaxation improves accuracy. Confidence does not come from perfection. It comes from comfort, and comfort comes from quiet practice. That means speaking alone, speaking to yourself, speaking without judgment. You do not need an audience to practice. You need space. Speak while walking. Speak while cooking. Speak while thinking. Let English become part of your inner voice. That inner voice is where fluency is born. When English stops feeling like a performance, it starts feeling like a tool for thinking, a tool for expressing, a tool for connecting. And connection is the real purpose of language, not exams, not scores, not accents. Connection. Quiet power is not about being impressive. It is about being authentic. When you stop trying to sound native, you start sounding natural. When you stop forcing confidence, confidence appears. And when you stop fighting English, English becomes your ally. This is a long journey, but it is a gentle one. You do not need to hurry. You do not need to compare. You do not need to pressure yourself. You only need to continue. Slowly. Quietly. Every day. There is another quiet truth most English learners never hear. You do not need motivation. You need permission. Permission to learn in your own way. Permission to move at your own speed. Permission to stop copying loud methods that exhaust you. Many people fail at English, not because the language is difficult, but because the method does not match their personality. If you are naturally calm, quiet, reflective, then aggressive learning will drain you, forcing yourself to speak fast, forcing yourself into noisy conversations, forcing yourself to perform. That is not growth. That is resistance. Quiet learners grow differently. They observe first. They absorb longer. They speak later. And when they speak, their words are grounded. This is not a weakness. This is a strength. Because quiet learners develop depth. They hear nuances. They notice tone. They sense emotion behind words. These are advanced language skills, but they only emerge when you allow silence. Silence gives space for meaning. In English, what is not said is often as important as what is said. Pauses. Tone changes. Soft emphasis. Quiet learners naturally pick up these details when they are not rushing. This is why many introverted learners eventually surpass extroverted ones, not faster, but deeper. Now let's talk about vocabulary. Most people chase vocabulary lists. They memorize words in isolation. They forget them quickly. No, quiet learning uses vocabulary differently. Words are not items. They are experiences. You do not memorize a word. You encounter it. You hear it in a sentence. You feel its emotion. You see how it behaves. Then the word sticks. That is why reading and listening are more powerful than memorization. One word in 10 contexts is better than 10 words in one list. Your brain remembers stories, not definitions. So instead of asking, How many words should I learn today? Ask. How many meaningful encounters can I have? This changes everything. You stop counting. You start collecting experiences, and vocabulary grows naturally. Now let's talk about mistakes. Quiet learners often fear mistakes deeply, not because they are weak, but because they care. They want to be precise. They want to be accurate. They want to respect the language. But perfection can become a cage. Mistakes are not failure. They are signals. Signals that your brain is experimenting. Every mistake means your brain tried something new. That is progress. Fluency is not the absence of mistakes. It is the ability to continue despite them. Native speakers make mistakes all the time. They just keep going. Quiet power means you do not dramatize errors. You notice, you adjust, you move on. No emotional reaction, no self-judgment, just learning. This calm relationship with mistakes is one of the strongest advantages you can develop, because fear blocks memory. Calm strengthens it. Now consider this. English is not one skill. It is a system. Listening feeds speaking. Reading feeds writing. Thinking feeds all of them. When one part improves, the others follow. But if you pressure one part, the whole system suffers. Quiet learning balances the system. You give more attention to input than output. You listen more than you speak. You read more than you write. This may feel passive, but it is not. It is preparation. Output is a result, not a starting point. When enough input accumulates, output happens naturally. This is why forcing speaking too early often creates frustration. You are trying to express thoughts your brain has not fully absorbed yet. Give it time. Silence is not stagnation. Silence is incubation. Think of English like a seed. You do not pull it out of the soil to check if it is growing. You water it, you wait. Growth happens underground first. This is the part most learners never trust. They want evidence. They want confirmation. But quiet power requires faith. Faith in process. Faith in repetition. Faith in patience. And patience is not passive. It is disciplined calm. That discipline is rare, which is why quiet learners often achieve rare levels of fluency. Not flashy, not loud, but solid. Their English does not collapse under pressure. It does not disappear in conversations. It does not rely on scripts. It adapts because it was built slowly. Now imagine using English not to impress, but to think. Thinking in English is the real turning point. Not translating, not rehearsing. Thinking. When English becomes part of your internal world, it stops being foreign. This happens naturally when you expose yourself daily without stress. Short articles, soft podcasts, slow conversations. Your inner voice starts borrowing English structures. At first, it feels strange. Then, it feels normal. And one day, you cannot tell when it started. That is how quiet transformation works. No moment, no explosion, no dramatic change, just steady alignment. This is English quiet power, not force, not noise, not speed, presence, consistency, depth. And when you build English this way, it stays with you. For life. There is one more layer to quiet power that most English learners never explore. Identity. Many people say, I want to speak English fluently. But underneath that desire, there is a deeper question. Who am I when I speak English? For many learners, English feels like a costume. They feel fake. They feel smaller. They feel less intelligent. Not because English changes who they are, but because they try to become someone else. They copy accents. They copy expressions. They copy personalities. Quiet learning asks a different question. How can English fit me instead of me fitting English? This question changes everything. You do not need to sound like a native speaker. You need to sound like yourself in English. Your pauses, your tone, your way of thinking. These are not obstacles. They are your signature. Quiet speakers often have a unique presence. They do not dominate conversations, but they anchor them. They do not speak often, but when they do, people listen, because their words come from clarity, not urgency. This is especially powerful in professional settings. Meetings, presentations, interviews. Fast speakers fill space. Quiet speakers shape it. When you speak calmly, your English feels intentional. Intentional English feels confident. Confidence is not volume. Confidence is steadiness. Now let's talk about accent. Accent anxiety destroys confidence. People believe that accent equals intelligence. That is a lie. Accent only shows where you learned the language. Nothing more. Some of the most respected voices in the world speak English with strong accents. What matters is clarity, not imitation. Quiet learning improves clarity naturally because you listen carefully, because you notice sound patterns, because you are not rushing. You articulate more clearly when you slow down. Speed hides mistakes. Slowness reveals precision. This is why speaking slowly actually makes you sound more advanced. You give each word space. You let sounds finish. You respect rhythm. English has stress patterns. Some words carry weight. Some fade into the background. Quiet learners feel this intuitively. They may not explain grammar, but they use it correctly because they absorbed it, not memorized it. This is a powerful advantage. Now consider confidence again. Most learners wait for confidence before they speak. Quiet power works the opposite way. You speak calmly first. Confidence follows. Confidence is a side effect, not a prerequisite. When you remove pressure, your body relaxes. Your breath deepens. Your voice stabilizes. Your English improves automatically. This is physiology, not psychology. A relaxed body produces a steady voice. A steady voice produces confident language. That is why quiet environments help learning. Noise creates urgency. Urgency creates mistakes. Quiet creates focus. Focus creates accuracy. This is not about isolating yourself from the world. It is about choosing learning conditions wisely. Late night listening, early morning reading, soft repetition. These moments matter. They shape how English enters your system. Now let's talk about discipline. Quiet learning still requires discipline, but not aggressive discipline. It requires gentle structure, a routine you can sustain, not ambitious schedules that collapse after 1 week. 10 minutes every day, the same time, the same calm. This teaches your brain reliability. Reliability builds trust. When your brain trusts the process, it stops resisting. Resistance is what makes learning exhausting. Remove resistance, and learning becomes light. This is why many quiet learners suddenly accelerate after months of slow progress. They removed internal friction. Now English flows. They are not faster learners. They are smoother learners. See, smoothness beats speed in the long run, because speed burns out. Smoothness compounds. Now imagine your future relationship with English, not as a challenge, not as a struggle, but as a familiar presence. Something you can step into calmly. You do not prepare mentally. You do not rehearse internally. You simply switch modes. This is the goal. English as a state of mind, not a task. And this state is built quietly. Every calm listening session, every slow sentence spoken, every moment you chose patience over pressure. These moments accumulate. They shape your identity as an English user, not a learner, a user. When that shift happens, English stops being something you study. It becomes something you live with. This is why quiet power lasts. It does not depend on motivation. It does not collapse under stress. It does not disappear when life gets busy. It is integrated. And integration is the highest form of fluency, not performance, not perfection. Integration. This is what English quiet power really means. There is a quiet shift that happens when English stops being something you practice and starts becoming something you enter. At first, English is outside of you. You prepare, you rehearse, you brace yourself. But over time, if learning is calm enough, English moves inward. It becomes a space you step into. This is why advanced learners often say, "I don't feel like I'm speaking English. I just feel like I'm thinking." That feeling does not come from talent. It comes from familiarity. Familiarity is built through repeated, low-stress exposure. Not excitement, not adrenaline. Familiarity is quiet. Now consider how you consume English content. Most learners choose content that makes them feel productive, not content that makes them feel connected. They choose difficulty. They choose challenge. They choose struggle. Quiet learning chooses resonance. Content that feels slightly challenging, but emotionally comfortable. You are not fighting the content. You are staying with it. This emotional comfort matters more than difficulty level, because your brain opens when it feels aligned. When you listen to something you enjoy, your attention deepens. Deep attention accelerates learning. This is why forcing yourself to listen to topics you hate slows progress. Interest is not a luxury, it is fuel. Quiet learners understand this instinctively. They allow themselves to choose. They trust engagement, and trust creates momentum. Now let's talk about thinking speed. Many learners worry, "I think too slowly in English." But speed is not the goal. Clarity is. Fast thinking without clarity creates confusion. Clear thinking at a slower pace creates precision. Precision builds confidence. Confidence eventually increases speed. Speed is a byproduct, not a target. Native speakers slow down when ideas matter. They speed up only when content is light. You are allowed to do the same. This is another quiet power advantage. You instinctively match pace to meaning. That is advanced communication. Now let's talk about emotional regulation. Language learning is emotional. Fear, shame, comparison, frustration. Quiet learning does not ignore emotions. It stabilizes them. You learn to notice emotional reactions without letting them control you. A misunderstanding happens. You breathe. You continue. A word disappears. You pause. You rephrase. This emotional steadiness is what separates fluent speakers from anxious ones. Fluency is emotional control as much as linguistic skill. And emotional control is trained through calm repetition, not through pressure. Now imagine speaking English in a stressful situation. A meeting, an interview, a disagreement. If your English was built under stress, it collapses under stress. If your English was built in calm, it survives pressure. Because your nervous system recognizes it. It says, "This is familiar. I know this state." Quiet practice prepares you for loud moments. This is deeply counterintuitive, but absolutely true. Now think about your inner standards. Many learners set standards based on other people's performance. That creates endless dissatisfaction. Quiet power resets standards. You measure progress by internal markers. Comfort, stability, ease. These are real indicators. When English feels less heavy, you are improving. When English feels more accessible, you are progressing. When English feels less dramatic, you are growing. These shifts are subtle but profound. Now consider the role of repetition. Repetition does not mean drilling, it means returning. Returning to the same content, the same voice, the same rhythm. Repetition builds trust. Your brain recognizes patterns faster. Your comprehension deepens. This is why quiet learners often re-listen to the same audio many times. Not because they did not understand, but because each layer reveals something new. Understanding deepens vertically, not horizontally. This vertical growth creates strong foundations. Strong foundations support spontaneous speech. Now think about silence again. Silence is where integration happens. After listening, after reading, after speaking. Silence allows consolidation. Do not fill every moment with input. Leave space. Space is not wasted time. Space is processing time. Your brain needs stillness to organize information. Quiet learners instinctively allow this. They are not afraid of pauses. Pauses are where learning settles. Now imagine reaching a point where English feels emotionally neutral. No excitement, no fear, just presence. This neutrality is powerful. It means English no longer triggers your identity. It no longer threatens your self-image. You are simply you, using English. That is freedom. Freedom is the highest goal of fluency. Not admiration, not approval, freedom. And freedom is built quietly, one calm interaction at a time, one patient day after another. At some point, you stop asking, "Am I good enough at English?" Because the question no longer matters. English is no longer a mirror you use to judge yourself. It becomes a window, a way to see ideas, a way to understand people, a way to explore thoughts you could not reach before. When this happens, your relationship with English matures. You are no longer chasing approval. You are no longer proving competence. You are simply using the language as it was meant to be used. Quietly, effectively, honestly. You trust your pace. You trust your process. You trust your voice. Not because it is perfect, but because it is yours. English no longer feels heavy. It no longer feels dramatic. It no longer feels like a test. It feels like a space you can enter calmly. And calm is not weakness. Calm is mastery. Because calm means you are not fighting. You are not performing. You are not pretending. You are present. This presence changes how people hear you. It changes how you hear yourself. It changes how English lives inside you. Quiet power does not announce itself. It settles. It settles into your listening. It settles into your thinking. It settles into your way of speaking. And once it settles, it stays. Not loudly, not forcefully, but steadily. When English becomes quiet inside you, something subtle begins to change. You stop preparing yourself mentally before using it. There is no countdown, no internal rehearsal, no moment of tension before speaking. English is simply there. And this changes how you move through real situations. You listen more fully. You pause without anxiety. You choose words with intention, not urgency. You are not trying to keep up. You are not trying to impress. You are present. This presence alters the entire interaction. Instead of reacting quickly, you respond deliberately. Instead of filling silence, you allow it to work. Silence gives shape to meaning. Meaning gives weight to words. This is where quiet power becomes visible, in conversations that feel uncertain, in moments where responsibility is real, in situations where words carry consequences. Here, speed loses its advantage. Prepared language fades, scripts collapse. What remains is grounding. Grounding means your attention stays in your body, not trapped in your head. You breathe. You listen. You speak only when clarity arrives. This steadiness creates trust. People feel it, even if they cannot explain it. A calm speaker feels reliable. A grounded voice feels credible. This has nothing to do with vocabulary size, nothing to do with accent, nothing to do with sounding impressive. It comes from alignment. Your thoughts, your breath, and your words move together. When alignment is present, communication becomes simple. Not easy, simple. You say fewer words, but each word lands. You do not chase perfect sentences. You choose accurate ones. Accuracy matters more than complexity. This is why clarity often sounds confident, even when language is basic. Quiet English prioritizes intention. You speak closer to what you actually mean, instead of what you think you should say. And when intention is clear, structure follows naturally. Now consider how decisions happen in English. When English lives outside you, every decision must be translated. Thought first, language second. This creates delay. It creates doubt. It fragments confidence. But when English is internal, decisions arise directly. Not flawlessly, but honestly. You no longer ask, "How do I say this correctly?" You ask, "What do I want to express?" This shift removes pressure. Language becomes a vehicle, not a test. In professional settings, this makes a visible difference. You organize ideas before speaking. You pause between points. You let listeners absorb meaning. Your pace creates rhythm, and rhythm holds attention better than speed ever could. People do not lean in because you speak fast. They lean in because you speak with purpose. Quiet power shapes space, instead of filling it. Listening also changes. You stop listening to respond. You listen to understand. You hear hesitation. You sense uncertainty. You notice emotional shifts. Your responses become more accurate because they address what is meant, not just what is said. This depth of listening is rarely taught. It develops naturally when silence feels safe, and safety allows meaning to surface. In moments of tension, quiet power slows the interaction. You ask clarifying questions. You repeat key points. You reduce emotional charge. Calm lowers intensity. Lower intensity restores clarity. This cycle stabilizes communication, and stability supports language. Quiet English does not collapse under pressure, because it was never built on pressure. It was built in calm. Daily interactions become lighter. Fatigue decreases. Self-monitoring fades. You are no longer watching yourself speak. You are simply participating. This reduces mental load, and lower load means endurance. English becomes sustainable, not something you perform, something you live with. Eventually, English becomes almost invisible, not absent. Invisible. Like your native language. You do not notice it, you use it. This invisibility is not loss. It is integration. As English settles into your daily life, you begin to notice a different kind of confidence. Not excitement, not boldness. A quiet certainty. You no longer scan your mind for approval. You no longer measure yourself against imagined standards. You speak when there is something to say. You stop when the thought is complete. This restraint changes how others perceive you. They sense coherence. They sense control. They sense intention, and intention carry authority. Authority does not come from knowing more words. It comes from knowing when words are necessary. Quiet speakers understand this instinctively. They do not rush to fill gaps. They allow conversations to breathe. Breathing creates rhythm. Rhythm creates flow. Flow makes communication feel effortless. Now consider moments of uncertainty. A question you did not expect. A topic you are not fully prepared for. Loud strategies collapse here. Memorized phrases fail. Speed disappears. Confidence evaporates. Quiet power responds differently. You acknowledge uncertainty. You slow the pace. You narrow the scope. Instead of answering everything, you answer what you understand. This honesty stabilizes the interaction. People trust someone who knows their limits more than someone who pretends to know everything. Quiet English allows this honesty without shame. Because your identity is not tied to performance. You are not being good at English. You are using English. This distinction removes pressure. Pressure is what causes breakdowns. Remove pressure, and even imperfect language functions well. Now think about storytelling. Many learners want to tell stories in English, but feel overwhelmed. Too many details, too many tenses, too many expressions. Quiet storytelling is simpler. You focus on sequence. You focus on intention. You focus on meaning. You let tone do the work. Tone carries emotion. Structure carries clarity. Vocabulary is secondary. This is why simple stories, told calmly, often feel more compelling than complex ones told nervously. Quiet power prioritizes coherence. One clear idea is better than many fragmented ones. Now consider listening again, but this time in group settings. Multiple voices, different accents, overlapping speech. Quiet listeners do not try to catch everything. They listen for anchors, key ideas, repeated themes, emotional shifts. This selective listening prevents overload. Overload is what causes fatigue. By listening selectively, you conserve energy. Energy conservation is a quiet skill. It allows you to stay present longer. Now think about writing. Quiet power applies here too. Instead of trying to sound impressive, you aim to be clear. You remove unnecessary words. You shorten sentences. You respect white space. This simplicity makes writing stronger. Strong writing reflects strong thinking. Quiet English sharpens thinking because it removes excess. Excess creates confusion. Clarity emerges when you let go of decoration. Now consider mistakes again, but from a different angle. Mistakes are feedback, not criticism, not judgment. Feedback tells you where your system is adjusting. Quiet learners treat feedback neutrally. They notice. They integrate. They continue. No emotional spike. No collapse. This emotional neutrality accelerates learning. Emotion distorts perception. Calm clarifies it. Now imagine long-term use. Years from now, English is part of your life. Not special, not dramatic. It appears when needed. It disappears when not. You switch effortlessly. This flexibility is the true sign of mastery, not constant use. Appropriate use. Quiet power respects context. You adapt without effort. Now reflect on where this strength came from. Not ambition, not intensity, not comparison. It came from consistency, from patience, from trust. Trust in a slow process. Trust that repetition works. Trust that calm accumulates. This trust is rare, and because it is rare, it creates uncommon results. English built this way does not fade. It does not depend on mood. It does not collapse under pressure. It remains steady, reliable, integrated. At some point, you stop thinking about progress, not because you have stopped improving, but because improvement is no longer the focus. Use replaces evaluation. You no longer ask, "Am I better than before?" You ask, "What am I doing right now?" This shift anchors you in the present. Presence stabilizes language. When you're present, your attention is not divided. There is no internal observer, no inner judge, only engagement. Engagement simplifies everything. You react to meaning, not form. Form adjusts naturally over time. This is how fluency actually grows. Not through correction, but through usage. Correction refines. Usage builds. Quiet English is built through use. Now consider emotional situations. Moments when feelings rise. Excitement, frustration, disagreement. Many learners lose language here. Emotions pull attention inward. Words scatter. Quiet power keeps you anchored. You feel emotion, but you do not drown in it. You acknowledge it. You name it. You move through it. Naming emotions creates distance. Distance restores control. Control allows language to return. Like even simple sentences can carry strong emotion when delivered calmly. Now think about disagreement. Quiet English does not avoid it. It approaches it carefully. You state your perspective. You listen fully. You clarify differences. You do not attack. You do not defend excessively. This balance lowers resistance. People are more open when they do not feel threatened. Quiet power protects the relationship while addressing the issue. Now consider growth plateaus. Everyone experiences them. Periods where improvement feels slow. Loud strategies panic here. More effort, more pressure, more intensity. Quiet strategies respond differently. You maintain rhythm. You trust the process. You keep showing up. Plateaus are integration phases. Your system is reorganizing. Forcing progress interrupts this reorganization. Calm allows it to complete. This patience is an advanced skill. Now think about how you practice. Not how often, but how. Quiet practice is deliberate, short, focused, consistent. You engage fully, then stop. Stopping is important. It allows consolidation. Learning happens between sessions, not only during them. Quiet learners respect this. They leave space. Now reflect on identity. At some point, you stop labeling yourself. Not a learner, not an advanced speaker, not a beginner, just a person who uses English. This identity freedom removes comparison. Comparison distorts motivation. Without it, your motivation becomes internal. Internal motivation is stable. It does not depend on praise. It does not collapse with criticism. It carries you long term. Now imagine teaching someone else. You notice how you explain things. You use simple language. You focus on essentials. You avoid overcomplication. Teaching reveals integration. You can only teach what has settled inside you. Quiet English settles deeply. This depth is what makes it transferable. Now consider moments of silence again. Silence no longer feels empty. It feels functional. It gives you time. It gives others space. It organizes thought. You are comfortable waiting. Waiting is a form of confidence. It signals that you trust the process. People respond to this trust. Conversations slow. Depth increases. Now reflect on the journey. It was not dramatic. It was not fast. But it was steady. And steadiness compounds. What you have now is not fragile. It does not disappear when conditions change. It adapts. This adaptability is quiet power. It does not announce itself. It does not seek attention. It simply works.